Meron po kaming mga videos na hawak. We saw in the video how the Chinese even threatened our personnel by pointing their knives at our personnel. Despite this, lumaban po yung ating mga sundalo, Lumaban po with their bare hands, With their bare hands. Makikita nyo po, tinutulak nila yung rib ng kalaban ng Chinese Coast Guard palabas, palayo. They were preventing the Chinese Coast Guard from hitting them with their bolos, their machete.
As clashes between navies and Coast Guard of China and Philippines intensifies, the Philippines Navy obtained the much-needed boost as the armed forces of the Philippines launched its newest Navy ship, the BRP Miguel Malvar, a 3,200-ton corvette patrol vessel. Hyundai Heavy Industries held a launching ceremony for the first 3,200-ton patrol vessel for the Philippine Navy at its shipyard headquarters in Ulsan, attended by high-ranking military officials from both the Philippines and the Republic of Korea. BRP Miguel Malvar is a state-of-the-art surface combatant, measuring 118.4 meters in length and 14.9 meters in breadth, with a cruising speed of 15 knots, about 28 kilometers per hour, and a range of 4,500 nautical miles or 8,330 kilometers. It is equipped with advanced weapon systems such as anti-ship missiles, vertical launch systems, and 3D AESA radar. The Philippines faces persistent threats from China, as clashes in the disputed features in West Philippine Sea intensified. At least 8 Philippine Navy sailors were injured after Chinese vessels on Monday sought to drive away their vessels on a rotation and resupply mission to 2nd Thomas Shoal in the West Philippine Sea. The troops, including one whose finger got cut off, were wounded during a confrontation with Chinese forces that rammed and towed their rigid-hull inflatable boats as they tried to reach grounded warship, the BRP Sierra Madre. The Filipino troops were not able to complete the resupply mission, as Chinese Coast Guard personnel also seized firearms of the Filipino Navy when they boarded one of the inflatable boats. This marked the first time that China boarded a Philippine boat and conducted a search. In a statement, Armed Forces of the Philippines Public Affairs Chief Colonel Xerxes Trinidad confirmed that one Navy sailor sustained a severe injury after an intentional high-speed ramming by the China Coast Guard during the resupply mission.
And because of the speed, pumatong yung forward portion ng Coast Guard, Chinese Coast Guard rib doon sa rib ng tropa natin. And unfortunately, nakahawak yung tropa doon. So, nadaanan yung kamay niya, yung daliri niya.
Meron po kaming mga videos na hawak. We saw in the video how the Chinese even threatened our personnel by pointing their knives at our personnel. Despite this, lumaban po yung ating mga sundalo, Lumaban po with their bare hands, With their bare hands. Makikita nyo po, tinutulak nila yung rib ng kalaban ng Chinese Coast Guard palabas, palayo. They were preventing the Chinese Coast Guard from hitting them with their bolos, their machete.
7 firearms were looted and forcibly taken. Initially, they destroyed the communication equipment, the outboard motor, sinira nila yon, then other navigational equipment, and they even took the personal cell phones of our personnel and yung mga other equipment natin on board na pwede nilang pakinabangan.
For me, this is piracy already because they boarded our boats illegally. They got our equipment. We are demanding that the Chinese return our rifles and our equipment, And we are also demanding from them to pay for the damages that they have caused, Babayaran nila po yun. Dahil hindi po tayo papayag na ganun lang na sisirain nila yung ating mga kagamitan at kunin lang nila,
In response to Monday's incident at Ayungin, American maritime security expert Ray Powell said, Manila and Washington should now hold serious discussions on the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty, MDT. Under the 1951 treaty, which U.S. President Joe Biden had described as ironclad, the Philippines and the United States are committed to come to each other's defense, following an armed attack on either country. According to Powell, there needs to be serious MDT discussions now, between the U.S. and the Philippines. First, China is clearly now blockading a Philippine military outpost, which already crosses the line into active war territory. Boarding and towing naval vessels and confiscating weapons indicates that Beijing seems convinced it can act with impunity, said the expert, who is director of the Sea Light Project of Stanford University's Gordian Knot Center for National Security Innovation. The project tracks operations at Ayungin and other parts of the South China Sea through satellite imagery. The United States on Monday, together with its allies, condemned China over a collision with the Philippines in the disputed South China Sea, the latest in a series of increasingly fraught confrontations that have raised the potential of a flashpoint for global conflict in the vital waterway. As Chinese vessel and a Philippine supply ship collided near Second Thomas Shoal in the contested Spratly Islands early Monday, according to statements from both nations, which blamed each other for the incident. China's Coast Guard said it took measures including warnings and interceptions, boarding inspections and forced evictions against the Philippine vessels. China claims indisputable sovereignty over almost all of the South China Sea, and most of the islands and sandbars within it, including many features that are hundreds of miles from mainland China. Multiple governments, including Manila, hold competing claims. In a post on X, Washington's ambassador to Manila Mary Kay Carlson said the U.S. condemned China's aggressive, dangerous maneuvers, which caused bodily injury and damaged Philippine vessels, which comes just weeks after Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. warned that the death of any Filipino citizen at the hands of another country in the South China Sea would be very close to an act of war.
What would happen if an incident that ended up killing a Filipino serviceman, Coast Guard, or in the military part of the Navy? A willful act, not only servicemen, but even a Filipino citizen. If a Filipino citizen is killed by a willful act, that is, I think, very, very close to what we define as an act of war. And therefore, we will respond accordingly. And our treaty partners, I believe, also hold that same standard.
Marcos has sought closer ties with the U.S., which has repeatedly stressed Washington's ironclad commitment to a 1951 mutual defense treaty between the U.S. and the Philippines that stipulates both sides would help defend each other if either were attacked by a third party. The incident Monday is the latest in a string of recent confrontations between Manila and Beijing that have raised concerns among Western observers of potentially developing into an international incident if China, a global power, decides to act more forcefully against the Philippines. U.S. State Department spokesman Matthew Miller said Monday, the United States stands with its ally, the Philippines, and condemns the escalatory and irresponsible actions by China.
We stand by our Philippine allies and commend the escalatory and irresponsible actions by the PRC to deny the Philippines from executing a lawful maritime operation in the South China Sea to deliver supplies to service members that are stationed at the Sierra Madre. The PRC vessel's dangerous and deliberate use of water cannons, ramming, blocking maneuvers, and towing damaged Philippine vessels endangered the lives of Philippine service members. It's reckless, and it threatens regional peace and stability.
Meanwhile, Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell on Monday discussed the collision with Philippine Undersecretary of Foreign Affairs Maria Teresa Lazaro. China had obstructed the Philippines from executing a lawful maritime operation in the South China Sea, interfering with the Philippines' freedom of navigation, Campbell said, according to a State Department readout. Pentagon also issued statement relating to the incident.
Obviously very concerning reports. In terms of the specifics as it relates to the Filipino sailors, I'd refer you to the Philippine government for additional details. And you've heard others within the U.S. government say this. This kind of behavior is provocative, it's reckless, it's unnecessary, and as you highlight, it could lead to something bigger and more violent. And so we're going to continue to stand with our Philippine allies. We condemn the escalatory and irresponsible actions by the PRC to deny the Philippines from executing a lawful maritime operation in the South China Sea. And as you've heard Secretary Austin and others say, the Philippines' rightful legal maritime claims must be protected.
The latest incident marks the first run-in between the two countries since a new law in China took effect Saturday to authorize its Coast Guard to seize foreign ships and detain crews suspected of trespassing for up to 60 days without trial. The Chinese Coast Guard on Monday said a Philippine supply ship ignored China's repeated solemn warnings and deliberately and dangerously approached a Chinese vessel in an unprofessional manner, resulting in a collision. The Philippines is entirely responsible for this, the Chinese Coast Guard said in a statement, a charge rejected by the Philippine military as deceptive and misleading. Instead, Philippine authorities accused Chinese ships of dangerous maneuvers that included ramming and towing of Philippines vessels. In a statement on X, Philippine Army spokesperson Colonel Francil Margaret Padilla said, the main issue remains to be the illegal presence and actions of Chinese vessels within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, which infringes on Philippines' sovereignty and sovereign rights. In 2016, an international tribunal in The Hague ruled in favor of the Philippines in a landmark maritime dispute, which concluded that China has no legal basis to claim historic rights to the bulk of the South China Sea. But Beijing has ignored the ruling. Instead, it has increasingly pushed its territorial claims in the strategically important and resource-rich waterway. Over the past year, China Coast Guard ships, reinforced by maritime militia boats, have been involved in multiple clashes that have damaged Philippine ships and seen Filipino sailors injured by water cannon. Known as Ayungin Shoal in the Philippines, and Rene Jiao in China, Second Thomas Shoal is a submerged teardrop-shaped reef located about 125 miles from the Philippine island of Palawan. It lies in the Spratly Islands, a mostly uninhabited archipelago where oil and gas reserves have been found, and which is claimed by China, the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei and Taiwan. The Philippine ship was on a mission Monday to supply its soldiers stationed on the BRP Sierra Madre, a rusting U.S.-built Philippine Navy landing craft that was run aground deliberately in 1999, with a national flag hoisted on board, to assert the Philippines' territorial claims over Second Thomas Shoal. China Coast Guard spokesperson Gan Yu on Monday accused a supply ship and 2 rubber boats from the Philippines of illegally delivering supplies to the stranded warship. We once again warn the Philippines, any form of infringement and provocation is futile. The Chinese Coast Guard is on full alert and ready to resolutely safeguard national territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and interests, Gan said in a statement. In a departure from past confrontations with China when his team were quick to issue statements and visuals, Philippine Coast Guard spokesperson Commodore J. Terriella provided no comment as the involved agency are from Philippine Navy. The armed forces of the Philippines also declined to give details of the latest run-in. Instead, Philippine officials made broad statements denouncing China's actions. China's dangerous and reckless behavior in the West Philippine Sea shall be resisted by the armed forces of the Philippines. Their behavior contravenes their statements of good faith and decency, said Philippine Defense Minister Gilberto C. Teodoro Jr. We will exert our utmost in order to fulfill our sworn mandate to protect our territorial integrity, sovereignty, and sovereign rights. It should now be clear to the international community that China's actions are the true obstacles to peace and stability in the South China Sea. A statement from the Department of Defense Secretary.
The main message is the 10 line is the provocation. And everything flows from that. They have no business being anywhere in the West Philippine Sea and other areas where we have jurisdiction. They are trying to bait us from straying from the main points and dragging us into action drama debate where we